Hello and welcome to another episode of the MSC Performance Podcast with me, Mark Coulson, and Mr. Luke Rogers. Hello, Luke. How are we?
I'm good, thank you. How are you? Very softly spoken to start with.
This is my soothing tone. This is my radio voice. And so a goal of mine when I retire from the fitness industry is to become a radio host. So practice now.
Have you already retired?
Well, semi-retired. It's an ongoing joke that perhaps I've already hung the trainers up, but we march on.
Lots of years left.
So it's been a while since I've done a podcast. I'm very excited to talk through the subjects we've got today. First of all, certain someone has competed in the British Championships last week. Do you want to update us on how you got on? And
First British in 4 years, actually, half because of COVID. Which took away, obviously, 2020. 2021, I skipped the British through the Worlds, which meant, 2020 I skipped 2022, sorry, because of, I've messed it up. It's been 4 years anyway. Yeah, I skipped one because of Worlds, skipped one because I just wasn't in good shape to do it. So this is the first one in 4 years. And man, it was excellent to be back. Like, I really enjoyed being in and amongst it. The standard just goes up every year, and it's just great to be a part of it. I placed 7th. I was hoping for top 5. I was hoping for top 3 if I had a really good day, and a couple of people missed lifts, which unfortunately they didn't. Everyone had a perfect day, and I had an okay day. I went 7th 9. I missed one bench on technicality. Got the plate stuck on the rack, which I just set up too diagonal. I then missed my last deadlift, which I've done in the gym, and I think I should have got it. Looking back, it moved quite well. I think if I needed it to try and gain a place, but it was kind of just to solidify being in 7th. I wouldn't have come 6th if I'd have got it. So I think because it didn't really mean much, I kind of didn't fully commit to it. But yeah, finished with 6:35, which is 50 off my best. But I feel really confident now, and I feel in a really good spot to push on. And yeah, I'm feeling really motivated moving into post-training at the British.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think looking at the deadlift back, it surprised me, really showed me how smoothly it was actually moving. But I think probably by then, heart wasn't in it. There wasn't a lot to be gained from a big grind, and you had a big grind in the squat as well on that last squat, which was a great lift. But I think just fantastic to be back amongst it. I'd imagine. I didn't realise it'd been 4 years. That's crazy. And for COVID and whatnot.
Well, 2020 there was no British. 2021 I think I skipped it because I was doing Worlds in 2021, and then in 2022 the British was pretty early in the year, and I just wasn't in good shape. I wanted to take the year completely off.
Got a year out,
and then got it back up quite a bit. But yeah, we're about. The top was 94% or 93% of my best, which I was pretty happy with. So 7% off it. Yeah. It just means now as well that if I have a good 3 months of training, I could be back in amongst the best numbers.
Yeah,
it's down to me now to really push on.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, I think having the time off with a couple of niggles that you've had, 93%, off your best totals, it's pretty damn good. And I think, as you say, on the day, everyone that was in and around you was just hit their perfect day.
And they all went 9 for 9, and they weren't coasting 9 for 9s. They were grinding out reps. And you're if a couple of people missed, and then I maybe could have got my last deadlift, might have been. I don't think it would have been a podium, but could have been 5th.
Yeah.
But everyone just had a great day, and that's what you want, though, innit? You want to be competing against the best people. But ironically, my bench was the one that was most down. My squat was 12 off my best. My deadlift was 20 something on best, but my bench was 15 off my best, which as a percentage was massive. The squat and deadlift were about 5-ish% off, but the bench is more than 10%. And just because I strained my pec in December, I just need to really build that up. So post comp now, the big focus is I'm benching first twice a week. I'm making that a priority, doing a little bit more kind of hypertrophy training, try and get a bit more body weight up. And yeah, I feel really confident. I'm feeling really good about it.
Fantastic. I think that kind of could lead into the main topic of discussion today, really, in terms of talking a little bit about programming, exercise selection. So we're going to talk about why your program might look slightly different to mine, why someone in our barbell club, one person might be doing a back squat, someone else might be doing a belt squat. So we're going to talk about specifically about exercise selection. And that's going to link into regards to anthropometric, so limb lengths. We're going to talk a little bit about like age, how busy you are out of the gym, all these kind of things, and how that can relate to exercise selection, and therefore the importance of like having a good coach who can identify these factors and not just be like, right, well, you need a back squat because a back squat's an amazing exercise. It's like, well, a back squat is an amazing exercise, but that might not be the best exercise for, you know, someone who's maybe a, you know, 32-year-old football player who's like, you know, got limited, you know, got limited, you know, dorsiflexion ankles, or, you know, et cetera, and we can then sort of push into talking about programming, but more in the micro. So like when we're designing a program, we work in 16-week blocks. We tend to break those down into 4 sets of 4-week blocks. Generally speaking, you know, sometimes programs could be 6-week blocks, 8-week blocks, but generally speaking, we'd look at 4-week blocks. But we're going to bring that right down to like the micro, so the weekly. So we're going to talk about like daily exercise selection, and then also weekly programming structure, and how a week would look for, say, a powerlifter, for a general pop, for a rugby player, for example. So should we link this into to yourself in terms of, now that the British is done, we're rebuilding, is it worth just talking people through how that might affect exercise selection and how the week would look?
Yeah, sure. So one of the big things for myself, slightly off piece, is like I've done a fairly similar kind of structure, which is your typical powerlifting kind of structure where you're squatting on a Monday followed by bench, then you deadlift and bench. I've been doing that structure for a few years now, and mentally, like, I don't know, like sometimes you're not going through the motions, but, you know, you've done it a long time, it's kind of second nature. You haven't probably got that excitement that you've got when you get a new training program. So the big thing for myself was just like making sure that I'm feeling really motivated to be intentful with the sessions. Like we speak before about, it doesn't matter if you've got the best program in the world or, you know, an okay program. The main thing is like the intent behind the programming.
Yeah.
A lot of people are like looking for the most science-backed or, you know, most individualized programming, and then attacking it half-assed. And you'll get someone else that's got like 2 5x5, or they're doing 5-3-1, and they're absolutely going hammer it and making fantastic progress.
Because it's fun. Well, not necessarily even fun, but it motivates you. So it could be fun, or it could be, it's motivating you because I know this is what I need and I'm working towards X, Y, and Z. So
yeah. And even if they're not, they're just fully pushing it as hard as they can. So if you could choose between the average program done as hard as possible, or as intentful as possible, as hard as the programming requires you to do, versus someone doing the best science-backed program but really not pushing it, the first one's going to get the bigger results, 100%. So there was a little bit of that into it. The other one, like I said, the bench was down. So it's like, okay, squatting and then going into bench press. You know, even if like you work in different primary muscle groups, there's still going to be that kind of overall fatigue that you're creating from doing the squats first. You're never going to go into it fully fresh. So changing the programming around, so I'm benching first twice a week. So I've actually dropped the overall pressing frequency from 4 times a week to 3, which might seem a bit detrimental to the overall goal of increasing the bench, but actually moving it so that twice a week I'm doing it fresh, I'm fully recovered, I haven't benched for a couple of days, and then I've got a bit more pressing within that session. I'm hoping that I feel recovered coming into it, in a position where I'm able to really push hard, and then facilitate more recovery in between the sessions to then prioritise it later in the week. And I think just doing it fresh is just going to change the mindset to it as well, because a lot of times you'll see like people squatting, they've done the squats, it's hard, they take their knee sleeves off. I'm not going to say they're relaxing, but you know, you're not doing your movement prep for it because you kind of just want to rush through because squats have took an hour. So I think just doing bench first is going to be massive for it, and I'm really looking forward to it. And it's been a good first week actually, so
just prioritising it.
Just prioritising what needs to be prioritised, and I'm still squatting twice a week, still deadlifting, but just trying to push bench to the forefront just a little bit more because it just needs to catch up. I'm just not good enough at bench compared to everyone else.
Yeah, it's just prioritising, isn't it? I think the same as anything in life. It's been trying to do a similar thing, and it's going a little bit off piece, but with business stuff, is like, you know, you've got a million things to do, but it's like, what the priority is, right? First thing in the day, get the most important thing done, get it out of the way. And it's similar with your training. It's like, rather than, you know, you like you say, go for your squats, hard work. Takes a while when you're lifting heavy weights, obviously, like it's long, and trying to get set up for a bench.
What's the saying? The dog that chases 1,000 tails catches none, or 1,000 balls.
I like that one, but I think the simpler one's probably the man who chases 2 rabbits catches neither. But I like your that rings us.
Oh, well, there you go.
I can't wait to listen back to the podcast and just like listen to that again. That quote was going up on the wall.
The landing. Chase. The man who chose. The dog that chases 1,000 tails catches none.
I've not heard that one.
Neither have I.
Just me. Just me.
Yeah.
Again, some brilliant. In terms of exercise selection, then, so
well, if you talk about your priorities, I think a big mistake that people make is when they're setting up the structure for the training program. Just had a conversation with Barney about it actually, and he was saying, "Oh man, my squats today didn't feel that good." So really, he's on the Barbell Club programming. So that is your Monday heavy squat, your Wednesday is your deadlifts. They're your primary main focus lifts, and then the Friday he's kind of like it's a bit of positional work for him. I think he's doing pull squats. So from my perspective, there you got to keep the primary focus. If all of a sudden the primary days are feeling a little bit off, and that Friday session, your secondary squat day, is feeling amazing, something's not right there. So first off, when you're talking about the programming, you're trying to keep the priority, and then the secondary lifts are in there for a reason. So you want it to be that you're performing really well on your Monday and Wednesday sessions, or whichever your primary sessions, your heaviest work for the week. And then your secondary days, if they don't feel amazing because you've got a bit of fatigue from those sessions, that's absolutely fine. And I think one of the mistakes people make is just trying to progress everything at the same speed. So if you're trying to really push the hard sets on your main squats and your main deadlifts, and then your session 3, you're also trying to push it on rather than facilitating recovery, adjusting based off the fatigue from those 2 sessions. All of a sudden that fatigue bleeds into the primary day, which then doesn't go quite as well. And then you end up chasing 1,000 tails again and not quite getting the results that you want.
Yeah.
So I think when you're looking at like what should be the priority, you're trying to prioritize in your microcycle the main programming, and then everything else is kind of then used to facilitate the performance in that day.
This is good. Yeah, we can delve into this. So in terms of we're talking about the training week and how it looks, and a lot of the, I don't want to say old school like powerlifting coaching, but you know, another way of doing it is like squat bench deadlift on one day, squat bench deadlift on another day, like going hard on one session, going hard on the other, etc., etc. But now what's interesting is powerlifting seems to be taking on more of a high-low model, which, you know, has been popularized in field sports in the last 5 or 6 years of, you know, okay, for example, I'll use my rugby example. We've got a game on Saturday, you know, day off / active recovery on a Sunday. Monday would be, let's say, a moderate day. Tuesday would be a high day where we go hard. So it's like, you know, game day +3. So you've got full recovery from the game by then or near enough. So it's like Tuesday's your hard day. You sometimes do a double session like an AM, PM. Wednesday you'd have off. So rather than trying to, you know, push again and, okay, well, on the Wednesday I'm going to develop my speed, I'm going to develop my plyometric ability. It's like, well, actually your nervous system's pretty shattered from a hard Tuesday. So am I better off just taking the day off and taking recovery? And then Thursday, you know, we would go into a very low volume but high intensity day. So high intensity, I mean, that could be not necessarily near maximal weights, but high intensity as in, you know, reactive plyometric work, sprint work, like high stress CNS work. And then, you know, Friday might be like, you know, a primer, and then you play on Saturday. So you're playing around with these like harder days, easier days. You're not going like, you know, let's say hard deadlift on a Monday, hard squat on a Tuesday, hard, you know, bench on a Wednesday, or rugby equivalent, which would be the same thing, but modifications of those movements, like maybe a hard belt squat, hard deadlift on Tuesday, a hard, you know, football bar press, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. But there's more, and I'm seeing that coming more into powerlifting now, which is really interesting. And our training is actually more similar than people would think.
Yeah, when you look at it on the face value, you might not see the similarities straight away, but then you delve into it, and absolutely. So I think if you split your squat and deadlift program in and compare it to your bench program, bench will normally on its own kind of microcycle compared to squat and deadlift, which kind of run separate, because obviously squat's going to affect deadlift, vice versa, but bench pretty much isn't going to. And it's not uncommon for people to be benching 3 to 4 times a week. So when you do 4 times a week with your bench press, you're going to have like your 1 or 2 harder sessions. You've got your primary bench, your hardest or heaviest training. Might not always be the heaviest, but probably the highest RPE for the week. You've got your secondary day, which will also be a fairly heavy. And then when you're getting into your tertiary and your 4th days, that 4th day in particular is a primer session, like you've just said, for your game. So For us, we haven't got a game. The game is the competition or the heavy lifting. So if you might be doing a heavy single, the fourth session is a primer session, and it's purely in there to set yourself up for a good performance on your main bench.
That's the game for you. It's like the heavier session.
This is it.
Because it's a sport that's, more determined on the amount of weight you lift. Obviously it's very important to be strong and lift heavy in rugby as well, but our score is determined on, tries, or in football it's goals. Yours is determined on the amount of weight you lift, so therefore the heavier sessions are more important, and like you say, you're doing that priming session to get ready for your big day, for your game.
And the mistake that people make is that they're trying to, if you'll see people say, oh, my third day might be, I don't know, like a light bench press or a spoto. It's normally fairly low volume. It might still be a single, but like 80% or something that's nowhere near 30. And, the more novice people that aren't quite used to that kind of setup might be like, actually, this has been really static now up to all the training block. Like, should we swap the exercise? And actually, because like I said, if you start trying to progress that back up, and you might start the training block at 80% for a double, which is going to be super easy. If you're trying to add a couple of percent every week, by the end of the block, you do 90% for a double, which is pretty much the same as a primary day.
Yeah.
So when if you'll keep that third bench or that fourth bench fairly static through the training block and just use it to then set yourself up for a good primary day, then that's going to be better than it be ramping up and then it's starting to really affect the primary day. And that's the same with your squats, what I said about Barney, where his Friday session is just pull squats. His Monday, he's got a hard session where he does his heavy squats, and then he follows it up with some belt squat after to get some volume in. Because for Barney, we're going to talk about anthropometrics, but he's a longer limbed person. So for him, belt squat's a really nice exercise that takes the load off his back and just allows him to get some more direct quad work in there.
It's a lovely exercise for a tall man.
Phenomenal exercise. But then, that means then that he's going to be fatigued, and his Friday session has took a bit of a hit. But it doesn't matter because his performance was really good on Monday.
It's just
main.
Not trying to be a hero on the Friday is like.
What is the focus of your Friday session? I'm trying to improve my technique. I'm trying to get some good exposure to set myself back up. It doesn't have
this sharpening the sword.
It doesn't have to go up every single week.
Yeah.
So
interesting. And I think that's like, again, with programming, you talk about it. It's there's the nuances are different, but the basic rules are so similar across the spectrum. For you in powerlifting, for me in rugby, for Barney in basketball, for being just a really athletic guy, round athletic strong guy.
You've got your high-low days. We've got our primary, secondary, tertiary days, but it's the same idea.
It's the same thing.
Primary is the high day. The low day is your tertiary day. Your secondary, I guess, would be your moderate day.
That's the thing. You come in on, rugby on Saturday. You come in on Monday, and you try and go really, really hard. First of all, you're probably not going to be able to go as hard as you'd like anyway. Like if you're playing a good tournament, physical performance is going to be down from the Saturday, especially at elite level. So are you better off doing it could be an upper session where it's not quite as taxing, or it could be a full body and it could be a unilateral day where the loads are less, the RPs are less. You're still working, you're not slacking, you're doing a decent workout, but really, it's good nutrition, good recovery, good workout, but not absolutely balls deep. And then on the Tuesday, you're ready to go hard with your hardest gym session of the week, where we've got plenty of days still before the game on Saturday. You've got plenty of days with, there's been since the game, and, and you do normally a field session on the Tuesday night as well. So it's a double day hard. So Wednesday, do you really want to come in and try and beat yourself up again and go really, really hard? Now, a lot of guys are programmed for, they will do something on a Wednesday still, but, it'll be low key or it'll be day off. I prefer day off on a Wednesday. I think it works really well. And then you're fresh again then for the Thursday, Friday, nice little primer, game Saturday, and hopefully we're strong with, we're maintaining strength, we're maintaining speed, but the volume is decreasing throughout the week as we get closer to a Saturday, and volume, as we know, is the, primary, cause of fatigue. We're fresh for a Saturday.
I think a lot about the Monday session, and when you talk about doing unilateral work, because you could do a squat or whatever. Let's say you do a squat, you might be tired. So you said it earlier that your performance is going to be down. And I think when you talk about the mentality of that session, if you had just the normal lifts and your performance is down, let's say 10% because you're battered from set day, the mentality coming into that session is going to be so much more negative rather than just doing a unilateral session and lifting fairly well. Like,
Such a good point.
yeah, the mentality of these kind of sessions, and that's why it's really important to understand that your tertiary day doesn't have to progress.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think, yeah, well, I know as a rugby guy, it's like that Monday,
It's not going to go well.
especially as not the youngest player around, like that Monday, I'm going to be tired. You come in, but you know it's not the hardest session. Like, you know it's a doable session, even if you're a bit tired. You know, we can hit what we need to hit. I don't want to say comfortably, but, you know, because we've got to work, obviously, but it's always achievable. Whereas if it's that Monday and it's like, right, I'm hitting 85, 90%, I'm hitting 9 RPEs, man, that's a mental struggle. Whereas I know, like, I can get through that Monday. Tuesday, I know I'm going to be in good shape for Tuesday morning. And then Tuesday, I've got no excuses. You know, it's game day +3. I've had a moderate session on the Monday. Like, let's say, you can split up as low as I'm doing that at the moment, up as Monday. Yeah, more low as Tuesday, although it's full really, and a full Thursday. And I know I can mentally get myself up for a hard Tuesday. That's all that I'm asking of myself is a hard Tuesday. Like, it's a hard day of the week. Wednesday, I know that that's there for the recovery, so that's a nice feeling. Thursday is a fun session. Like, Thursday, Friday are fun sessions where it's like stuff I like doing, low volume, high intensity, which is exactly what I like. And then, yeah, that's perfect.
The mentality of things is interesting when you talk about one argument with programming is either using a static RPE model or an ascending RPE model. So if like through training block going, we typically have ascending, so you go 6 RPE, 7 RPE, 8 RPE through training block versus just doing 8 RPE the whole way through. But knowing that you're going to be not as strong a week 1 as week 3. Well, I think mentally going into that week, like if I give you a 6 RPE after a deload and it's not a phenomenal performance, but you know it's a 6 RPE, with then the chance to progress through the training block would be better than doing, personally I think, than doing an 8 RP and your performance being down. Like the mentality of doing that where it's not going to feel amazing, but you're still trying to push to an 8 RPE. I prefer the ascending, and it's kind of similar to what you've just said.
Yeah, well, you know, next week
will be better. Yeah.
Etc. Yeah. Interesting. I mean, that carries over to the structure of, you know, we've talked about performance there and, you know, elite level performance. If we're talking about, let's say, general population, I don't really like the term with our guys because they're all super athletes, but, you know, in terms of working, you know, if you're working a 9 till 5, for example, this also carries over into that as well, doesn't it? With some of our barbell guys.
Of course it does.
So, like, you know, for example, everyone that we're coaching, we're getting a good, detailed, you know, getting good detailed information about their background. You know, what are the stresses outside of the gym? You know, what's the work like? What hours are they doing? When can they definitely train? When can they prioritize good training? Some days they can get more done. Other days, other things on outside of work. And that's where, like, again, you know, with the barbell club especially, we're really focused on getting to know the individual, sitting down with them and working out that diary and that plan so they can be consistent and they can do their best days at certain times so that they're going to get the best performance. So, you know, as an example, like, you know, if any of the guys are, yeah, like we've got guys with like high-end jobs and it's just basically just organising the programming around the day-to-day and the week-to-week and just, you know, keeping tabs on it as well. I think that's important. And then within that, in the micro, like exercise selection as well. Should we delve into that?
Yeah.
But
yeah. But I think, the exercise selection is really interesting. I think depending on, if we break it down into like the different categories, if we go men and women first, I always find quite interesting. Because there's a lot of similarities between the training, but there are like individual differences that you need to take into account. Most women get a lot higher amount of repetitions at a percentage compared to men. Yeah. So if you look at the different kind of rep testing research, men at 80% would get a certain amount of reps. Women on average is a lot higher.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of different reasons. They're not 100% sure why, I guess, but the reasons we think is like the fiber type distribution, and I think also on average men being stronger, the absolute load on the bar might be slightly less, so I think the accumulation of work isn't quite as much. Usually on average as well, women are a little bit shorter, so the height comes into account. These are all on averages, of course.
We have to stress.
Yeah. There's a lot of women that are very strong and stronger than men, but on average, the same level man versus woman of the same height, the amount of reps they would get would be very, very different. So that's why we give RPEs rather than percentage based in our barbell club programming. Because if we gave 80% 3 sets of 5 to Barney, who's incredibly tall, he's going to struggle with that session compared to someone that's very short, like me, or like 3 by 5 at 8% for me would be a very manageable session. It would probably kill Barney.
Yeah.
It would kill you.
Yeah.
If we were working at the same RPEs at that stage, so if we do 3 by 5 and then we look at the percentages and we were both aiming at a 7 RPE, mine might be 82% and yours might be 75, 77. It would be down 5% for sure. That doesn't mean you're not working as hard, because when you take into account, when you're working tonnage and it's the reps times the weight times the distance travel, when you start to factor that in, then you're like, okay, I'm not working lighter than Luke. It's just I'm doing more work per rep than he is, and that needs to be factored into your overall training.
Yeah, on paper, like my percentage is lower or whatever, but we're working equally as hard. It's one of the first things I noticed when I first started coaching properly many years ago. Was like, because back then it was like it was pretty much all percentage based, wasn't it? It was like, right, you do week 1 5 times 5 at 80% of 1 rep max. Next week 5 sets of 4, whatever. And then I remember just coaching and being like, man, some guys are like,
this on the floor in a puddle.
Some guys are on the floor in a puddle, like all over the place. This is crazy. And then over the years, like, everything you've just said there, all the factors, especially with like male, female, like, I remember that being a real big thing. I was like, wow, I can just train women so much harder than men.
Just absorbing work.
But yeah, all the factors you've mentioned, like, obviously play a role. And then like that's something to take into consideration. We're talking about, like, not necessarily exercise selection does come into it, but even there, just to set some reps coming into it is like, that's why Barney's not going to be doing necessarily the same work as
a lady, a shorter lady.
Exactly. Like you say, distance travel is something to take into consideration.
The distance travel, I remember there was a study, and it's like it's a perfectly plotted of distance travel to the amount of reps you get at a given percentage, and it's just it's correlated so finely that the shorter you are, the more reps you're going to get at 80% compared to a longer lift. Can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but I remember like it was literally perfectly correlated. So if you're like 5'7", short femurs, squatting at 80%, you might get 12, 13 reps. And you go all the way up and you travel it, you're looking at the different distance, and it's all of a sudden 6 or 7. I'll give you a real life example. I've got the velocity tracker that tells you the distance traveled. And when I squat, if I remember correctly, it's about 51, 52 centimeters. Alex Chalkley was 70 centimeters. He's literally doing almost 50%. It's like 40% the work extra per rep to me.
So how can you not factor that in? You have to factor that in. And I think as you get more experience as a coach, I think that's one of the like key things is, it's in-depth work like that. It's managing the client, managing the individual aspects of each person. Like, each person's different. Each person's got, someone's got a harder job than someone else, different stresses than someone else.
We're quite lucky here that it's fairly balanced, isn't it? With it being city centre, you've not got anyone that's worked in the fucking coal mines for 12 hours. It's all fairly office based, but occasionally you'll get someone that isn't office based and got a physical job. Yeah, and that is massive. Like, the difference then is huge.
For sure, 100%. Anything else in regards to exercise selection?
Well, I think when we get most people doing some form of squat and deadlift, but the allocation of the volume after it is often very different. So like we said about Barney, keep using Barney, he's going to love this episode.
I know, he's
a superstar. But we give him bell squat because he can allocate an extra bit of volume in there, rather than because he's quite long-legged. Back squat can be quite a taxing exercise for him, so then he makes up his volume with the bell squat after. Someone else might not need that, and actually really tolerate a good amount of volume with more back squat orientated stuff.
In terms of leverage, biomechanics, low, the difficulty of keeping that bar in the center of mass and how long the femur is, the stress that's going to have potentially on lower back and things like that. Like you say, that's a smart call where we go fairly minimal volume on his back squat, you know, you're not gonna destroy him. You might do 3 sets of 5 as an example, rather than 5 sets of 5, and you do the extra couple of sets on the belt squat, take the load away, you know, take the shearing forces away from the lower back, and get some extra volume through the legs. Easier movement to get lower, a bit less technical as well. Like,
Think about that.
that's just
Just to compared to like Naz, who I also coach, and she does her back squatting, and she's like built very well for squatting. Like she's got quite short femurs. She's a very good technical squatter as well.
Yeah.
And then when she's finished her back squatting, we do extra squatting. We get a high bar squat. Well, if you gave Barney, right, Barney, you've done your main squats, but now you're going to do high bar squat for some extra work. You'd be fucked.
Yeah.
So you're looking at like who can handle. It's the same with like you look at who can handle the most amount of work on deadlift, and you know someone that's a little bit taller that's really bent over, they're going to not be able to tolerate as much work as someone that's got longer. Like if you've got short arms trying to deadlift, you're not going to be able to handle as much deadlift volume compared to someone that's really well suited to the deadlift. And I think that's something that you need to take into account when you're allocating your different volume. So if you're short armed, you might do like a low amount of volume on your deadlift and then make up the work with another kind of hinge exercise.
Okay, so if you're let's say there's someone listening who is still a bit of a beginner, they're trying to, get their own programming, etc., or they're thinking, right, what I want to squat, I want a back squat. Let's say that person really, they're really tall, they're not particularly mobile, they're struggling to get down into position. I think for that person, what we're probably saying is work on your mobility, work on the patterns. By all means, do it light, do it for low to moderate volume, but then load up with other exercises that are going to be more suitable.
I don't want to give you another quote that I'm going to butcher, but if you cook a steak and you don't cook it long enough, you can always put it back in the pan. If you've overcooked it, there's nothing you can do.
It's done, isn't it?
So if you're starting out and you've got absolutely no idea,
you can't go back.
So I would start with a quality over quantity approach with your back squatting. I would do like 2 or 3 sets, which is going to be more than manageable for the majority of people.
It's a great quote.
And then do a bit of extra volume work after it. And then after 2 or 3 weeks, start to assess how you feel. Like, how is your performance in the gym? Are you still progressing? Do you feel pretty good in between sessions? Or if you're coming in and feel battered, then you probably need to reduce it down. But if you're finding you're feeling well recovered, you're feeling well rested, you could potentially then look to add a bit more training work as the weeks go on. But I think it's better to start slightly lower with a quality approach than it is to just go in full quantity, doing sets for the sake of it.
Take the metrics. How do you feel?
Just as simple.
And again, not to, it's not a barbell club promotion, I promise, but that's one of the great things with the barbell club and like they did the weekly coaching of how do you feel? The feedback and the importance we place on feedback. How's that person feeling? Right, actually, we can add a little bit more. Like you say, you can always chuck it back in the pan, go a little bit more well cooked. But as I say, when it's burnt, it's burnt. And Rudy, who's a phenomenal athlete who trains here at MSC, does like super high like endurance guy. He's suffering with like some tibialis pain and like onset of shin splints, and he was like, what should I do? And I was like, well, the damage is done. The damage is done. You've overcooked your steak, so to speak. But certain things we could do recovery, but essentially it's just time. And then when we start back up again, it's just a case of like that's exactly what I said was right. I'm going to do like off the minimal dosage running that you can get away with as for where you want to be. You're going to replace like 80% of that cardio conditioning with bike work, with rowing work. Then we're going to nudge the percentages up a little bit, 5%, 10%, 15%. We start to build the running back up alongside appropriate strength work, and that kind of, I think, again ties in with your wonderful analogy.
It's the same with when you look at the different demographics. So we talked about the men and women with the different percentages on average. We talk about age and training age. Like, younger people are going to have more work than others, but it all comes down to just finding like a starting point that's fairly conservative and then gradually building things back up based off how you feel. So if you're younger, your training age is younger, you're going to be able to handle more volume. For a multitude of factors, like the recovery is going to be a little bit better. You're probably going to be lifting slightly less, so your recovery and the amount of damage you do in the session is going to be less. And that's something to take into account, but it all just boils down to just starting fairly conservative. If you've got no idea where to start with setting up your own training block, obviously best option is get a coach. If that's not viable, then start fairly conservative with the amount of work that you're giving yourself, and just allow things to progressively build back up, monitoring the numbers and just making sure that you're feeling recovered. Most importantly, like, you might feel a bit sore, but your performance is still going up. To me, that's enough. Keep training. But if you're finding that you're coming in, you're battered, your sessions drop in, your recovery metrics, your sleep suffering, you're probably doing a little bit too much, and then you need to just get it back. But it's a lot easier to start slower and small amount of work and then progress it up versus the other way.
Absolutely. I think that's probably a good place to
stop. Matt's nudged us about 10 times. I mean, hopefully we need to call it a day.
We'll do a part 2, but that's that's really interesting stuff. And
I think there's a lot of factors that come into writing a program, a lot of individual differences that we need to take into account.
That is that you know, for a young coach as well. If there's any young coaches listening there, it's okay. It's cool to know how to teach a squat. You know, that's obviously essential. It's important, but that's only a very small part of the battle. You know, we can teach a squat, we can teach a deadlift, but can you manage someone's training program? Can you individualize it based on all of the factors we've discovered? And everybody's different. That's the key. So basic rule of thumb for a lot of things stay the same, but individual nuances
are important to take into consideration.
Don't chase 1,000 tails. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening. It's been a pleasure to be back on the podcast, and
we hopefully this makes it out this time. The last one didn't quite make it. Hopefully this one does, under the guidance of young Matt. And thank you all for listening.
Producer Matt.
And we will see you on the next one.
Ciao.
Why did it have to